Hoopla, Part 2. It so happened that there was a church outing scheduled that very Saturday. Mr. Luby called Saturday morning to invite Vinny. Luby asked Mom directly, and she said sure without a trace of disdain, but in his head, all Vinny could hear was his father's voice wondering where things went wrong. The youth group bus traveled up to Burlington Baptist to hear a guest speaker. Oddly enough, the speaker was a cherubic, hand-wringing Catholic priest touring the country to promote some kind of interfaith initiative. His name was Father Dowd, late 50s, balding with boxy black glasses as big as welding goggles. Dowd gave a rambling hour-long discourse recounting his entire life, including the decline of his dear old Brooklyn and how we must all control our passions. This last part was something he came back to again and again, to the point that Vinny wondered if Father Dowd had some kind of problem he wasn't at liberty to disclose. On the ride back, Vinny asked Mr. Luby what the difference was between Baptists and Catholics. Drawling, Luby diplomatically explained the technical distinctions, including the Holy Trinity and communion, but quickly added, "We're all Christians and worthy of Jesus' love, etc., etc., and bless his heart." Vinny nodded. He was pretty sure that this would be his last excursion with the Baptists. Mr. Luby added, "Them Catholics worship with a little more, what's the word?" "Hoopla?" offered Vinny. "Yeah, I was going to say pizzazz, but hoopla is better, Vinny. That's exactly right." Vinny grinned and said, "Hoopla!" so loudly that the other kids on the bus stopped talking and stared for a moment. Through the window, bare tulip furrows of the Skagit Plain rolled by like brown corduroy bleached by November moonlight. Luby placed a hand on Vinny's shoulder. "Bless your heart." The next night, Vinny noticed something odd. His mother had developed a little paunch. They were clearing the table standing next to the sink when Vinny patted her tummy and said, "Hey, Slim." His mother's lower lip trembled and she burst into tears. "I'm sorry," he exclaimed. "I didn't mean it." Mom looped a lock of blonde hair over an ear with her thumb, pulled Vinny close, and laughed through the tears. "I'm going to have a baby, Vin." "Really?" "Yes." "Does Dad know?" "Not yet. Do you think we should surprise him?" "Yeah." Surprises were good, right? For a second, Mom looked like she was sorry she'd told Vinny or that he'd guessed her condition before she could tell him herself. "I'm going to have a brother?" "Or a sister." "Cool." And there in the kitchen, as hot, sudsy water filled the sink and fogged the window, it seemed lonely and treacherous all of a sudden. Nothing Vinny could put his finger on. Things had changed above and beyond the obvious. It was almost like his mother had been waiting for Vinny to guess at the truth before it could be created into certainty. Was that possible? Vinny went back to the bedroom and debated whether or not to write a letter to alert Dad. What kind of game was his mother playing at? It was strange. Dad returning in the spring to find Mom either heavy with child or actually holding a newborn. Surprise! Surely she planned to tell him. To not do so would be like Dad coming home without any legs. After an uneventful and lonely Thanksgiving, Vinny went back to the exchange and bought the cheapest dress he could find. Why spend more when Mom wouldn't even be able to wear it for another year? And after you have a kid, you always go up a dress size or two. With the leftover money, Vinny bought Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones with the zipper on the album cover, candy bars, a new basketball, and a ton of comic books, which he told himself he'd will to his baby brother. If it was a sister, she could have them someday if she wanted, but he figured it unlikely that a girl would want superhero comic books. He wasn't even sure he wanted them for himself. It just seemed important to spend the entire 50. A few weeks later, it was finally Christmas Eve. Mom lay sprawled on the couch, sipping mulled wine, while Vinny trimmed the tree. She was really beginning to show. "I want a cigarette," she said. Vinny had finally written a serious letter to Dad with news of Mom's pregnancy. Dad fired back that he already knew about it and proceeded to lecture Vinny for 3 pages about the responsibilities of being an older brother. Vinny countered with a request that Dad quit smoking since Mom had had to give it up. Dad hadn't responded to that one. "Dad said he'd quit," Vinny lied. "I believe it when I see it." The dress lay wrapped and waiting in red paper with Santa Clauses all over it. Vinny had conveniently lost the receipt. He continued to fiddle with the tree and tried to avoid looking at the gift. He couldn't keep his eyes from being drawn to it. When it was time to attach the star, he couldn't reach. He tried tipping the tree, but that didn't work either. So he hung the star on a lower branch and just stared at the top, his attention drawn to the highest point, where, among the pear-shaped multicolored tree lights that Vinny had flung, a green and faded pear-shaped bulb hung flaccidly off to one side. It stuck out in a saggy, weird kind of way. After about a minute of contemplation, Mom drained her glass and remarked that the bulb resembled a diseased penis. Vinny busted up laughing and couldn't stop for about 5 minutes. Mom laughed too and poured herself some more Christmas wine. "I love you, Mom." "Love you back." Vinny snuggled into Mom. He placed a hand over the embryonic mystery. For the rest of the night and into Christmas Day and New Year's, they'd randomly blurt out, "Diseased penis," trying to catch one another off guard. It was as if they knew the time was fast approaching when they'd no longer have this bawdy intimacy binding them together like fast lovers. It felt fun to say it, like some kind of cathartic battle cry sworn to Vinny and Mom alone. They left the tree up well into January because the cheap lights would never hang quite the same way again with that particular carefree attitude of carnival clutter. Once everything was put away, the joke would be forever banished, and blurting out "diseased penis" in the presence of his father just wouldn't make sense. It would be funny, but in a disconnected way, like dancing in a sequined dress in front of his mother and chanting "Hoopla, hoopla, hoopla." The end.